So what are we seeing in terms of development of the environmental labeling market? I think we've seen an enormous growth of schemes, particularly since the 1990s, leading up to there being probably hundreds of schemes in operation. In our data set, we have at least 550, but if we count really every scheme and every claim that's being made, there are probably many more than that, running into the thousands internationally. So it's a fairly bewildering world for anyone to try to get into, be they consumers who are interested or businesses who want to stand out and find themselves a suitable labeling scheme. It's a confusing world. So why are there so many labels coming into operation? I think it's partly because businesses are trying to find a way to take advantage of the increased demand for environmental goods that comes from consumers and comes from other businesses. Surveys are always showing that consumers are interested in environmental goods. Therefore, businesses and other NGOs are looking for ways to make themselves stand out and to show off their environmental credentials. Sometimes they find that existing schemes are not doing exactly what they want them to do. Therefore, they start looking to develop their own niche, and we see a form of market differentiation. New schemes are introduced either to have more or less stringent standards or to target new or different environmental impacts. And that overall leads to a largely crowded world of different labels, which in fact each one is differentiated for a good reason, but still it can appear to be a crowded marketplace. How do consumers or other end users react to this large number of labels in the world? Well, I think it's a fine line between having the choice to go out and look for the right label, the one that really speaks to your need. It's a fine line between that and just there being too many. There are some surveys showing that really consumers, those that are interested in environmental goods, are quickly overwhelmed or see a certain amount of fatigue in their choices when they start seeing too many labels. So it can be a fine line between providing the choice and being too many labels. Given this rapid growth and multiplication of schemes, what kind of responses are we seeing from various stakeholders in the landscape of labels? I think it's an interesting point is that we're seeing responses coming not only from governments but also from non-government entities, be they NGOs, civil society organizations, or from businesses themselves. And we're seeing certain standard-setting bodies, those that are actually providing the labels, coming together, finding ways to either recognize each other's standards or, in fact, to develop their own codes of conduct which they sign up to, which are trying to provide a force that competition in the market leads to increased credibility and increased quality rather than acting as a race to the bottom. But we're also seeing some governments who are stepping in to develop still voluntary, but what we might describe as focal labels or focal standards which provide a high quality standard that can then be adopted by other private sector or NGO label providers. And in Europe particularly, we're seeing piloting of product environmental footprinting standards, and, for example, which could be used for that purpose. So what conclusions can we draw about how government should respond to this large multiplication of schemes that we've seen? I think that's a difficult question because what's true is, while we see it, there's definitely an increase and a growth and a multiplication of these schemes. As I said, they are differentiating themselves. There are economic niches that have been taken for various number of schemes, but also we're seeing that it's quite difficult to really understand what the real impacts of these schemes are and where they're overlapping and where they're having a definite impact, because it's surprisingly difficult to go out and measure the uptake and the impact of a particular labeling scheme. Therefore, there are different views as to how government should go forward on this. Some governments are keen to promote their own focal labels and to make a voluntary intervention in the market. Others are more keen just to take a more light touch approach and to try and steer the market through introducing guidelines for public procurement or other non-regulatory approaches like that.